Let's bring in CBS News Chief White House correspondent Nancy Cordes. She's traveling with the president and joins me now from Edinburgh. So Nancy, what was President Biden's message at the climate summit when he spoke today?
Well, Elaine, his message was that the U.S. and the rest of the world's nations have just a short time to act, a narrow window in which they really need to recommit themselves to the promises and the goals that were set 6 years ago in the Paris Climate Accords. Because what we know is that not only have they failed to reach those goals, but in some ways the world is going backwards, that it is emitting more carbon than it was 6 years ago, even though the goal is to become carbon neutral by the year 2050. He actually brought an apologetic note to his remarks today as well, Elaine, basically saying that he knows that the world has lost some time because the U.S. pulled out of the Paris Climate Agreement under the last president, and recommitting both himself and this country to trying to do more now that the U.S. is back in the fold.
Well, the president is trying to bring the U.S. back to the world stage in climate talks, yet he has been forced to significantly scale back climate provisions in his spending plan. Has that impacted his message?
It's been challenging, the fact that not only has he not been able to tout the fact that his Build Back Better plan, which contains about $500 billion worth of climate provisions, not only can't he say that it is passed, but now it appears once again that it is stalled. Because even though the president said before he came here to Scotland that he was confident that he now has the Democratic support he needs to pass it, well, Joe Manchin, the Democratic moderate senator from West Virginia, kind of threw a wrench in that when he suddenly announced that he actually has very big concerns again. He's worried about the inflation that could be caused by all this new spending, and he wants to see a lot more of the fine print before he signs on to anything. Now, the White House is saying it still feels confident that at the end of the day, the bill will have enough support to pass. But clearly, the president can't claim that it is on the verge of passing. He can't say to world leaders, look at what I'm doing, you can do the same, when it's still in a bit of limbo right now.
Right. Well, the summit in Glasgow is all about climate change, but that was a big focus at the G20 meeting, too. How would you characterize the general tone on climate change at both gatherings?
Well, there was a lot of cooperation and a lot of shared acknowledgement that more needs to be done. But I would say also some disappointment that the G20 nations weren't able to take bigger strides. The president actually said point blank that he is disappointed that Russia and China, their leaders, were not at that summit, and Putin and Xi are not at this summit either. And they're not really on board with some of the more ambitious goals that the U.S. and some European nations have. And because of that, they're really making some incremental progress. They made some deals on the margins to reduce methane emissions, to avoid promoting steel and aluminum, particularly dirty steel and aluminum that is often produced by China. They talked about no longer financing coal-fired power plants, things like that. But these leaders all realize that they're going to have to do so much more than that in order to turn things around. And I do think that there is a little bit of frustration that, they're in this situation where they still need to make good on goals and promises that were set 6 years ago. They can't be even more ambitious because they know that some of the world's biggest emitters just aren't on board.
And Nancy, well before this trip, you and I have talked a lot about the president struggling with his approval rating as his domestic policy had stalled. How has the president addressed that?
Well, the White House still, and the president himself still get a lot of goodwill when he's abroad. Still, you hear from world leaders when they're on the stage with the president that they're glad that the U.S. is back. They obviously find him easier to work with than his predecessor, who often had disparaging things to say about summits like the G20, about international organizations like the U.N. And we certainly know how he felt about the Paris Climate Accords because he pulled out of them. So there's still a great deal of goodwill here, but obviously these leaders are looking to the U.S. to lead the way. And while President Biden has set out a lot of very ambitious personal goals when it comes to climate change, and even though the White House says that if this Build Back Better plan were to pass, it would be one of the biggest down payments on climate change legislation in generations, they can't quite celebrate yet. They would love to get that recognition here on the world stage. They haven't been able to do that yet. I will say that there has been a great deal of work being done for months now, not just surrounding these summits, but really doing the quiet diplomatic work behind the scenes for many months to get to a point where they can announce things like the fact that the G20 nations have agreed not to finance coal-fired power plants abroad any longer. Those things don't just happen overnight. They happen because of a very persistent effort on the part of the U.S. and other nations. And so they're glad to be able to show that these countries can work together to make change. They'd just like to be able to announce bigger changes.
All right. Well, Nancy Cordes traveling with the president in Scotland. Nancy, thank you very much.